The results of this project not only showed that people support a 4-day week, which is of course unsurprising, but it also showed us that a 4-day week is possible. The report from this project was covered widely in the media, and it was sent to all MSPs and Scottish ministers, and it was used to campaign and lobby the Scottish Government on the 4-day week. Some of you may have attended our webinar in the summer of 2021, where Autonomy presented their report to PCS members. What followed from this was the announcement of the public sector pilots of the 4-day 32-hour week, and through the Scottish Government's pay policy, employers were encouraged to sign up to this. We should never underestimate the collective power of PCS members throughout this period and the strength of feeling behind the 4-day week in influencing the Scottish Government to pilot it. We know that currently the Scottish Government is making a policy decision over the future of the 4-day week in the Scottish devolved public sector, and at the end I'll come back in and speak briefly on the next steps in the campaign, the PCS campaign, on the 4-day week and how you can all show your support for this. There are hundreds of you here today, which tells us that 4 years on from when PCS started our work on this, PCS members are still interested and care about the 4-day week, and now is the time for your collective voice to be heard. This webinar is an opportunity for you to hear from PCS representatives who have been involved in the pilots in South of Scotland Enterprise and Accounting and Bankruptcy. These employers should be commended for taking the bold decision to pilot the 4-day week, and Gillian and Rob are here today to speak to you from a PCS perspective about them and their members' experience. We also have Phil Lindsey from the 4-day week Foundation here, and Phil is going to talk about the recent 4-day week pilots in the UK private sector and in South Cambridgeshire Council, as these pilots involve types of work that are typically challenging to reduce working time in. I'm now going to pass you over to our PCS representatives, Gillian Boyd from Accounting and Bankruptcy and Rob Davidson from South of Scotland Enterprise, to speak about their and their members' experience of the 4-day 32-hour week. Gillian and Rob, over to you. Gillian, you're on mute.
Good start. So I'm Gillian Boyd. I work for the Accounting and Bankruptcy in Coinning. We are an executive agency of the Scottish Government and have been in Ayrshire now for 20 years. We are responsible for personal insolvency, the debt arrangement scheme, and a small part of corporate insolvency in Scotland. We've got 3 business areas. We've got our delivery branch, which deals with the administration and supervision of personal bankruptcies, protected trust deeds, and the debt arrangement scheme. Our policy area deals with operational policy and compliance and also policy development. And finally, we have our corporate services division, which includes finance, procurement, contract management, IT, business development, reception and mail. So we're quite a kind of, standalone area. Mainly we deal with members of the public, but we also deal with money advisors, insolvency practitioners, companies and organisations who are owed money, and also lots of Scottish Government and UK government departments. At the beginning of the pilot, we had 121 staff, and a high percentage of that are part-time. A full-time week for us was 37 hours, and that was reduced to 35 in October. Our pilot was to do 32 hours, which meant that was like for myself as a full-time member of staff, I had to do 8.5-hour days over the 4. Our chief executive was very enthusiastic about the pilot and was supported by his senior management team. Most of the focus for us before it started and during it started was staff engagement. And there was lots of meetings with senior staff, branch heads, down to team level, and even we were talking about it at tea points. It was just the total topic of conversation. We were kept up to date all the way through, from discussing it to getting it approved and beyond. Oh, hold on a second. All right, just want to sit there. Sorry about that. So PCS also met with members to discuss issues, and all were keen that concerns were raised regarding the longer working days for part-time staff and perhaps being able to fit in their school drop-off and pick-up times and other caring responsibilities. But before we started everything off, we all signed a terms of agreement which set out both the responsibilities of the employer and as a staff. And there was also a 21-page frequently asked questions document produced, which has been amended as people have come forward with different queries during the whole of the pilot. It does mainly consist of how to record your leave and absence, as neither EHR or Oracle were updated with our working patterns, and that was probably the most frustrating part of the pilot for us. I'll now hand over to Rob, who'll be able to tell you how everything went before the pilot in SOSE.
Very much, Gillian. So I'm Rob Davidson. I'm from South of Scotland Enterprise, and we are Scotland's newest enterprise agency. We cover Scottish Borders and Dumfries and Galloway council areas. We are 5 years old this year, and at the commencement of the pilot had 141 staff. We worked a 35-hour week pre-pilot, and perhaps due to the relative youth of the organisation, we had a lot of both flexible working arrangements and also compressed hours agreements. So more than 30% of our colleagues were on some form of compressed hours agreement prior to the commencement of the pilot. SOSE, as you'll guess from the timescale, was created during COVID. So our early experience was as a primarily digital organisation, albeit we always had office spaces in Dumfries and Selkirk, which are our contractual workplaces. But the initial starting point for staff was predominantly working remotely. We're primarily client-facing, with the majority of colleagues working with either business or community organisations. We have a standard business hours contact facility. We also do policy work, so a comparatively smaller number of staff engaging with regional, national partners on economic policy, etc. And we have a small central support and an admin function, finance and HR, with some shared services with Skills Development Scotland. In terms of preparation for the pilot, there was engagement with staff both run by our HR team, but we also ran a PCS engagement with, but not excluded. With but not limited to PCS members to work through potential issues and concerns, and also developing an FAQ document, which I guess is not dissimilar to that which AIB produced, with a lot of consideration, for example, of logging leave, etc., and systems that didn't necessarily neatly dovetail with the model that we adopted. We were reducing from 35 hours to 32 hours. So again, a similar for longer working days model being proposed. Undoubtedly a great deal of enthusiasm for the concept, but indeed some concerns around implementation. So, for example, over whether existing compressed hours arrangements would be preserved, which they were. Concerns over the shift to 4 longer days with impact, for example, on colleagues with caring responsibilities. Those were in due course substantially addressed through flexible arrangements within teams, but also the impact of travel for colleagues in a very large geographical area, so potentially quite long commutes or travel time added to longer working days, producing a kind of SOSE specific geographically based area of concern. This was also coupled with an expectation which was introduced simultaneously with the pilot, and again in response to our growth as a predominantly remote working organisation, that staff would spend 2 days either in the office or engaging with clients and partners. In practice, this settled down quite quickly, with the trend being in the main that colleagues opted to be out and about across the region, which we think has had broad benefits for the overall visibility and the profile of the organisation as a relatively young organisation in the public sector scene. There were concerns over impact on part-time staff, and also for particularly colleagues who were maybe the only member of staff fulfilling a particular function, on whether everything would be able to be fitted into the shorter working week. I want to go on to cover those in a bit more detail. Liam, if we could go on to the next slide, please. So these are the parameters of success that were set out by the employer, and we warmly welcomed the emphasis that you'll see throughout them on employee health and well-being, which we were very keen from a PCS perspective and working with our HR colleagues to ensure we're kind of at the foreground of all the considerations and implementation. But the importance of business productivity, of course, wasn't lost on us. And we were very hopeful that we would see material improvement in all of these factors during the course of the pilot. I think with that, I'll hand back over to Gillian. Thank you.
Our parameters for success were widely similar. One of probably the biggest ones was that there was no impact on our stakeholders. I have to say, for years, we've dealt with queries coming into the office through team mailboxes and through Hunt Group telephone numbers. So really, there wasn't going to be much of a change there for our stakeholders. It was only if they needed to speak to somebody in particular. But that was addressed by how the teams changed their working practices. Again, there was ongoing staff surveys. Autonomy sent out questionnaires at the beginning, middle and end of the pilot. And they also carried out interviews with individual members of staff at the beginning and in the middle. And also from a team perspective, we would be feeding up to our heads of branch, and that would be going to senior management all the time, just keeping them up to speed on it, what was happening, how we were doing what we needed to do. Our KPIs, we've got certain KPIs that are set every year, and these are measured on a quarterly basis, and obviously we had to either maintain them or improve them. Certainly as an organisation as a whole, we just seem to spend an awful lot of our time thinking, how can we improve this, how can we improve that? So that probably just went into overdrive to make sure that we could make this work. And then, as you can see, as the last one for us, it was anything was shown to be slipping, whether our stakeholders were making complaints or our KPIs weren't being met, then the decision would be taken to end the pilot prematurely. And if I could just ask Liam to move on to the next step, the next slide, please. Okay, so what happened during the pilot? Everyone within AIB participated. You could opt for a Monday or a Friday as your day off. The day you got was decided at team level to ensure that we have sufficient coverage for all of our services. For example, we have to run an award schedule for bankruptcies every day. I'm only aware of one team out of 14 that had to put a rota in place to cover Fridays, and it wasn't the team that was responsible for the schedule. There was also some flexibility in there for people wanting to change things. I know I certainly in a couple of times changed my day off to a Monday if something came in that I had to attend on a Friday. Some of our part-time staff chose to reduce their hours over the 4 days they worked. And so continued just to maybe do 4 days but less hours, and others choose to do slightly longer days, and that meant actually they were able to have 2 days off per week. And actual working hours were flexible as they had been during COVID. We'd learnt from that. So most of the concerns for our staff that had caring responsibilities, etc., were alleviated. It was left down to our teams to ensure that the work was still covered. We looked at shortening meetings, making more use of our computer systems to carry out tasks, and planning techniques to organise workloads. And over the pilot, our KPIs exceeded our targets and were better than 23-24. Our regular stakeholder survey found that our pilot had no direct impact on the services that we provided. My personal experience was that I probably already worked 8.5-hour days when I was doing my 5 days. I'd start my week off and just think, oh no, I can't deal with that. Do it tomorrow, do it tomorrow, do it tomorrow. And I'd put myself under pressure on a Friday to finish everything, and I was tired. But moving to the 4 days, I'd become more focused and organised with my time. And I think that's because I feel more refreshed at the beginning of my week. And I feel that I can get sort of everything done. And I'll pass you over to Rob, and he'll let you know how SOSE dealt with it.
Thanks very much, Gillian. So we gave a lot of thought to what was necessary to alter jobs in order to do the workload in reduced hours. So, for example, is this meeting really necessary? Shorter meeting time, so take your 1 hour down to 45 minutes, etc. Only inviting the people you certainly need to be there. Thinking about other methods of sharing information so that there's wider awareness if there's kind of tangential relevance to another individual's job role, for example. Of course, we already had significant experience of that because we've got a widely dispersed workforce across a large rural region. So there was a lot of online working, a lot of use of Teams channels, shared drives, etc., that was already in place. So some of those working practices weren't new to us, but we did have to consider how they were to work most efficiently in a 4-day context. Similarly to AIB, colleagues were offered the opportunity to state their preference for a Friday or a Monday. Perhaps not unsurprisingly, the split was in favour of Fridays, so around 60% for a Friday, 40% for a Monday. Therefore, not everyone got their preference. I was amongst them as it happened. But again, that I think settled down quite quickly, quite well. Turned out in my own instance to have some significant benefits when my partner changed job and tends to have a Monday holiday, so that actually fell out very nicely in my instance. The practical implication of that was that there tends now to be 3 busy midweek days. So a great deal of your interaction with colleagues will happen on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And there is a necessity to think quite carefully about diary planning, to plan ahead around diary commitments and balancing workload. But it also has the benefit of providing a significantly quieter day in terms of colleague interaction, whether it's your Monday or Friday, where you can get on with the other tasks that don't require a meeting and don't require any great degree of interaction. So divvying up workload on that basis, as in my experience certainly, and I know from other members and other colleagues, has tended to be quite productive. In terms of participation, all but one member of staff opted in, and to the best of my knowledge, no one has since opted out for the entire duration of the pilot, which you'll recognise has been extended twice, and indeed has just been announced by HR today, is being further extended to the end of August. So we now have a lengthy period of experience and of ongoing work in the 4-day model. We definitely found that there was an adjustment period. I think the first 6 weeks felt quite compressed in some respects. It took a bit of continual reminding that you couldn't necessarily find a colleague on a day that you previously expected to. So it did take a little bit of working into. But the thinking about flexibility, thinking carefully about planning your workload, the interaction with line managers around what you were prioritising when and why actually became much more important, arguably, than it necessarily had been in a 5-day working model. All of those things really came to the fore as important for us to get to grips with. They took a little time to settle down, but have worked, we think, very effectively and efficiently since then. We don't quite have the KPI assessment that the AIB has, but we're pretty confident that in terms of work-life balance, there has been significant benefit and improvement. We're pretty certain that sickness absence has decreased significantly, and that efficiency and delivery has, if anything, improved across the period. And in many instances, the colleagues that we work with across the region actually aren't particularly aware that we are doing a 4-day working week at all, because it hasn't really had any impact on the availability of the organisation and the availability of us as individuals within the organisations to respond to their needs and engage with them really in the same way as we were doing. Although it does have the significant benefit that I think we've been much fresher and more energised and ready to attend to the tasks and challenges that we're presented with than we maybe would have been on the previous 5-day model. Liam, go on to the last slide, please. And so this is a quote from our own Chief Executive, Jane Morrison-Ross, in Parliament earlier this year, looking at around a 92% increase in staff morale, which is very much what we would have hoped for, and in her assessment and SLT's assessment that there's been no decrease in productivity at all, which I think we were quite confident we felt was the case, but we're immensely reassured to see that being reflected back to us from the leadership of the organisation, and indeed their enthusiasm for it being stated on the public record. Colleagues have expressed it to me as being life-changing, and undoubtedly what happens at the end of the pilot and the prospects for continuation through permanent implementation have probably been the top of the agenda for every meeting of the branch that we've had pretty much since the pilot commenced. And I'm clear from the feedback we've had from members that if there were to be some change in the future, the majority would look to secure some sort of compressed hours agreement in order to preserve as much of the benefits that they felt individually as they possibly could. There's been absolutely widespread approval from members who've used the time for all sorts of positive things depending on their own circumstances. But the common thread throughout all of those has been their appreciation of and the support for the concept now that we've experienced it in practice, and indeed experienced it over an extended period, not just confined to the 12 months that were originally envisaged. And as we see from the slide, that extends to the leadership of the organisation, who I think have put it every bit as well as we could. But of course, it's also fair to say from our perspective that we're absolutely delighted to share with everyone how positive this has been for us as an organisation. But we'd really like everybody else to be able to benefit from it in their own organisations as soon as practically possible. I think we've proven that it can work. It can work in a client-facing, public-facing context, and that the work still gets done very well and to a high standard, notwithstanding the change to the working week. And with that, I'll hand back to Gillian. Thank you.
I think everything that Rob has said there, we would certainly say the same here at AIB about wanting to continue the fact that there has really been no changes. I spoke to our chief executive and asked for his thought on the pilots, and he gave me the following. For me, it was all about productivity. We had to deliver at least the same and ideally more output in less hours. Certainly for the first year, we have managed that, and largely just by cutting out time wasted in meetings and by streamlining processes. We also spent a lot of time on staff engagement. We are a casework handling agency, and casework handling jobs can be repetitive and hence dull, and we owe it to our staff to make the agency the best place to work that we can, and the autonomy report shows people have been able to take a real advantage of a 4-day week. Within our organisation, I think, again, everything has just seemed, I don't know, people just seem lighter as we're walking about. Our last People survey ranked AIB higher than average of all participating civil servants in 8 out of 10 of our 9 core areas, and we ranked equal or higher to the SG in 4 out of the 9. Our leadership and management was perhaps the biggest, with a 13% higher than SG, and that could be down to the fact that the 4-day working week was the biggest change that we faced that year. And I think with the support from senior management and the way it was all handled, I think that says an awful lot. Looking back on the measures of success, our stakeholders have not been affected. Our KPIs have improved on our previous year. Our absence levels are steady over short term, but down over long term. And our headcount is only reduced by sort of retirements. And most importantly, that last one that we had, we didn't end the pilot. In fact, again, ours was extended until the end of June, and we're just waiting for formal confirmation that we will also get an extension to the end of August. Staff feedback is that they do want to continue. Again, like SOSE, a lot of our people, if they're not, will perhaps be looking for compressed working hour arrangements. And I've received the following comments from members and other colleagues. The first one was the 4-day working week increased productivity across the board. It reduced stress and increased job satisfaction. The work-life balance has increased the likelihood that I will remain in the team to retain knowledge. It will be likely to stop the revolving door of staff, which will be useful as experienced people keep leaving for better paying and more flexible roles elsewhere, meaning less experienced people are left to figure out the jobs by themselves. This is why things progress at a snail's pace and why we are years behind other institutions. Another one has said the pilot's been life-changing and allowing them to spend quality time with their child and saving nursery fees, and they would hate to give it up. Similarly, the 4-day working week has given this person a better work-life balance. It allowed time to make appointments on their day off, provide childcare for family. Household chores didn't have to be done at the weekend, freeing up more time for family time, and it has led to less stress and more productivity. And finally, we've got members who have been able to use the working pilot to spread out care responsibilities, which ease pressure. Weekends are now more enjoyable as they've got more time to spend on themselves. So again, just a real commitment here from the staff that we really want to keep this, and PCS will be working with our management to do whatever we can to keep it going. And I'll now hand back. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gillian, and thanks, Rob. It's amazing to hear that we've got PCS members that have been working a 4-day, 32-hour week, and this is the report back. And certainly from my perspective, how nice is it just to hear that people are saying things like it's been life-changing? That's great. Seeing that there's been quite a few questions, and one's about what do we do to make sure that these are no longer pilots and that they're permanently implemented, and get a lot of questions about that. We will come to that in about 10 minutes, so please stay tuned. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Phil Lindsey from the 4-Day Week Foundation to talk about the 4-day week in the private sector and across the UK. Phil, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Hopefully you can all see that. Oh, hello. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that. So yeah, I'm going to cover some of the wider context of a 4-day week. First of all, looking at the world's largest pilot of a 4-day week that took place right here in the UK back in 2022. Then I'll focus on a really good case study from elsewhere in the public sector where the 4-day week has had a massive success. And then I'll finish by sort of digging into our accreditation scheme at the 4-day week Foundation, which gives us a real insight to perhaps how widespread the 4-day week is, particularly how many sectors the 4-day week is taking hold in already. But first of all, I should probably introduce myself. So I am Phil Lindsey. I am an organizer for the 4-day week Foundation. And we are the UK's national campaign for a 4-day week. There are campaigns right across the globe. This is a bit of a global movement, really. But we are the one for the UK. And we are independent and non-partisan. So we're not linked to any political party. And that's because we think there's a case to be made for the 4-day week to anyone, regardless of their political persuasion. We, as I said, ran the world's largest 4-day week trials in the UK back in 2022. Very successful, and I'll just give you a little snapshot of that success here. So stress and burnout went down for everyone involved, whereas profits were maintained. And in fact, there was a slight boost to the average profits for organisations involved. And that's why we say that the 4-day week is a win-win for employers and employees. And, you know, we've just heard some great examples of where that is very much the case already. But yeah, just to dig into that a little bit more. So in terms of employees, perhaps more obvious, stress, burnout is reduced, time for living goes up, enjoyment of work, work-life balance, all these things are improved for employees. But for employers, you see a real boost to recruitment and retention, two things that are particularly important, I think, in the public sector, where maybe pay offers can't necessarily compete with the private sector. This can be a way to kind of give people a reward that they deserve. But also you see absences go down. You know, people who work less, surprise, surprise, are healthier. They do not get ill as often. So yeah, we see a reduction in absences as well. So big improvements for employers and employees. And lastly on this page, just to say that these are the areas that we as an organisation focus on. So we focus on the politics, we lobby politicians on the 4-day week. We do a lot of support for businesses. We run a number of pilots, you know, throughout the year and throughout the years. So we're quite handy now at bringing businesses across to a 4-day week. And lastly, we do a lot of workplace organising. So I'm involved in maybe about 30 different workplace campaigns for a 4-day week at the moment, and then also you know, some wider campaigns within unions as well. And just on that briefly, and I will touch on this later, we as an organisation are affiliated to PCS nationally. So that's who we are. So I'm just going to start by talking about the trial that we held back in 2022. And that was for 61 companies and almost 3,000 employees. And this was companies, you know, a wide range of companies, some you might not expect. So we had a brewery, we had a fish and chip shop, we had a wire manufacturer involved. So lots of different kinds of work. You know, it's not just for white collar office based roles. The 4-day week, the reduced working week can really take place in a lot of different kinds of jobs. And the trial was run from June to December of 2022, 6-month trial with a 2-month lead-in. So that was 2 months of us coaching these organizations through what they would need to do to move over to a 4-day week. And then also just to say, so it's a 6-month trial. Yeah, trials are very, very important. It can take a little bit of time to kind of work out the right kind of 4-day week for your particular organization. Tweaks may need to be made. And obviously, you know, we all want to be evidence-led here in order to prove that the 4-day week is successful. So a nice long trial of 6 months or more, always a good idea. The research on the trial was conducted by these fine establishments, and they looked at a mixture of administrative data and also survey data as well. So we had, you know, the real hard numbers showing that, you know, profits were maintained, but also, you know, they looked at the anecdotal data as well. And we've just heard some there, the real changes that a 4-day week makes to people's lives. And those changes can be quite significant. The people involved, or the organizations involved in the trial, had a whole range of different 4-day weeks. Often people think of the 4-day week as being just, well, we're going to work Monday to Thursday and everyone has Friday off. That works for some organizations. But again, as we heard, there are different ways of arranging your 4-day week. So some stopped on a Friday, some split into different teams. So you'd have half the week Monday to Thursday, half Tuesday to Friday, or some would even have another team with Wednesday off in the middle. Then in other situations, you'd have it completely decentralized. So, you know, everyone on an individual plan for their 4-day week, some even on a rota basis, and even all the way down to an annualized 4-day week, which is where, you know, if you've got a particularly busy season, you might work slightly more than a 4-day week during that busy season, and then slightly less than a 4-day week during the quiet season. So really, it's about, you know, finding the right 4-day week that fits for your particular your organization or job. But to say that, you know, a reduction in working hours, a meaningful reduction in working hours, and a 4-day week can work in the majority, if not all, kinds of work. So some of the statistics, really, really positive. Staff turnover down by over half, and absences down by almost 2/3. So again, it's that recruitment and retention and reduction in absences. It's a huge cost saving for any organization, whether you're private or public sector, and a huge benefit of moving to a 4-day week. Also, you know, almost 3/4 of staff experienced burnout reduction, and burnout meaning, you know, a mixture of feelings around workload, pressure with stress. But yeah, a very significant improvement there. And then also over half saw a significant decrease in work-family conflict. Yeah, I mean, you know, conflicts in the home or with our families, you know, are quite often based around the amount we work and trying to fit in our lives around work. So moving to a 4-day week reduces those pressures, and means that, you know, we have, you know, happier families out there, so which is a fantastic thing. So that was the UK trial. And now to look at a specific example from the public sector. This is South Cambridgeshire District Council, who had a fantastic trial of a 4-day week, and it's ongoing at the moment. They're currently finalising the decision around making it permanent. So South Cambridgeshire District Council, they have a 4-day week for all their staff. Office workers were the first to join the trial, and then the trial was moved to include refuse workers as well. So really important, you know, some larger organizations have a situation where it can be difficult to implement for all staff at the same time, or so it's, you know, it can work to gradually move through the organization from where it's maybe easier to implement to where it's seen as being harder to implement. The important thing is that you end with an equitable solution for everyone. And here that was a 32-hour working week for everyone. So everyone's harmonized on the same hours, and that's, you know, a nice fair way to deal with it. And then, you know, two key things. Their retention improved, their KPIs were maintained. So they're delivering the same great service for their constituents, and have actually improved in a number of areas. And also at the same time, their recruitment and retention has improved. And as you can see there, they saved £371,500 over the course of a year in agency staff costs. They had a lot of gaps, a lot of hard to fill roles, particularly in things like town planning, where they were struggling to fill those roles long term. Once they moved over to a 4-day week, filled them long term, and saving a significant amount of public money. So just to think, if the civil service, if the public sector more widely adopts a 4-day week, how much money could be saved? An incredible amount, it would seem. So that is South Cambridgeshire District Council. And then we're going to lastly look at a 4-day week for all in terms of our accreditation scheme. You may have seen this, you may have not. Around the beginning of the year, there was quite a lot of news when we hit 200 employers on our accreditation scheme. And that meant around 5,000 workers as well. So we've now accredited 228 companies in total. And as I said, it's more than 5,000 workers. Almost all of them are on 32 hours or fewer in their workplace. And within those 228 companies, we have more than 28 industries represented. And this includes a lot of industries where you wouldn't necessarily think a 4-day week would have an easy time of taking hold. So things like manufacturing, things like architecture, there, some of these kinds of businesses or sectors where you think of long hours, particularly heavy workload, but actually by reducing to a 4-day week, by thinking about processes, by getting a proper amount of rest, you actually find that productivity is maintained or goes up. And this is, works in, a vast array of different sectors. We have noticed that our rate of accreditations is growing steadily. And this is, I just want to be clear about this. We have accredited 228 companies as official 4-day week companies, but we know there's a lot more out there. A lot of what we do is reaching out to companies who maybe release a press release or put something on LinkedIn about their 4-day week, and then we get them fully accredited. Some surveys have been done that kind of have shown that it may be as high as 6 or 7% of organizations across the UK are already working some version of a 4-day week. So it is hugely widespread, and our accreditation scheme is sort of like gradually growing to reflect that. And then last of all, as I said before, we are nationally affiliated with PCS, and I will be meeting with Ruby and Lindsey tomorrow to see how the 4-day week foundation can help with the PCS Scotland campaign for a 4-day week. And that is that. All right, back to Ruby.
Thanks, Phil. It's so interesting to hear about the 4-day week trials and how that's bringing benefits to not only workers but public services and business. I can see that there's been a question about public facing roles, and I think the refuse collectors is just an amazing example of that, where the 4-day week has actually been, initiated in non-office based environments. So before we move on to the Q&A, I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about the next step in the PCS campaign on a 4-day week, and I hope that this will answer some of the questions that have come in, because I can see someone has rightfully said, how do we make these pilots a permanent reality? So, as I've said earlier, we know that the Scottish Government is now considering its policy position on the future of the 4-day week in not only South of Scotland Enterprise and Accounting and Bankruptcy, but in the whole of the Scottish devolved public sector. It's really clear from what we've just heard from Rob and Gillian and Phil that the 4-day week is possible and that it can be implemented in jobs that are, arguably quite challenging to reduce working time in, like bin refuse collectors. I just want to say as well, it's really clear from what Rob and Gillian and Phil have said, it's not one size fits all for the 4-day week, and that is the context for what the PCS ask is going to be going forward. So, according to PCS members who work in South Scotland Enterprise and Accounting and Bankruptcy and have been involved in these pilots, and as you've also heard, according to the leadership of those organisations, the pilots have been a success. And we hope that the autonomy report on the pilots, which we expect to be published in the coming months, will correlate with what we've heard here today. So the Scottish Government has now got a choice to make, and the choice must be to not shy away from this. It's a really progressive change and they shouldn't shy away from it, but to really lean into it and to make a policy decision that not only allows South of Scotland Enterprise and Accounting and Bankruptcy the autonomy, I suppose, to permanently implement the 4-day 32-hour week, but also one that allows all employers across the Scottish devolved public sector access to the 4-day week. And what I mean by access is that point I just made about there's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of the 4-day week. What I mean is that employers must be allowed the freedom to trial and pilot the 4-day week and ultimately be given the opportunity to implement it in a way that works for their organisation and their staff, and to work with recognised unions to do this so that your voices and the voices of our wider membership are part of the decisions over any move to a 4-day week, as you've just heard as an example from Rob and Gillian. So we're meeting with the Minister for Fair Work, Tom Arthur, at the end of this month, and this will be our message. My colleague Liam is about to post a link to our petition in the Q&A, so please go there just now when you see that come in. Please click the link and sign and put your details in to support it, and share it with your colleagues, whether they're PCS members or not. If you were here earlier, you heard us talk about the fact that it was PCS that managed to successfully campaign and lobby the Scottish Government in 2021 to introduce the pilots, and it will be your collective voice that urges them to make the right decision just now. So again, Liam is about to post that in the chat. Please do look for it, and again, share it with your colleagues and your friends, whether they're PCS members or not. And if they're not PCS members, please do ask them to join as well. So I'm now going to move on to the Q&A. We've had a number of questions. What I will say as well is if we don't get to them all, we are going to issue an FAQ document. My colleague Liam has very kindly been working on one in the background for the last week or so, and we will add the questions that are asked here, and we will send it out to all members across the Scottish devolved sector directly. So I'm going to take a question here, and it is, how were public holidays handled in the pilots, given that they mostly fall on a Monday? Gillian, Rob, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, it was really the way that it's been handled is the way the Scottish Government policy is now, that you can actually, for some of the holidays, choose to work them and use it at a later date. So myself, my day off is a Friday. We have is it a day and a half, I think we get on a Friday, and I now can just take them whenever I want. And again, I've got a member of my team that doesn't work on a Monday, and therefore that they can just use those public holidays as extra leave. So they just take them as and when, a bit like how our part-time staff did it. You know, if it was a non-working day. So there's really not much change, but you do still get those holidays. There's no issue with that at all.
Thanks, Gillian. Rob, is that the same in South of Scotland Enterprise, or have you got anything to add to that?
We had a flexible arrangement for public holidays from the outset, prior to implementation, with the exception of the Christmas and New Year, or day after Boxing Day, New Year Day public holidays, which everyone is required to book. And we have a shutdown between Christmas and New Year that we're expected to have enough leave allowance left to cover. Other than that, entirely flexible. So that actually never became a particular issue. In fact, it was probably helpful.
Great, thank you. And to both of you as well, and actually Phil, you come in on this as well. We've had a question, I think it's a really good one. Did Accounting and Bankruptcy or South of Scotland Enterprise have to hire more staff for cover to reduce to 32 hours? Rob, come in first.
No. Our headcount went up very slightly, but that was planned because we were still growing as an organisation, but we didn't have to take on extra staff to cover.
And Gillian?
No.
No.
That was actually one of the sort of, when we were doing the pilot, everything had to stay cost neutral.
Great. And Phil, do you have anything to talk to that? Because I think people will be particularly interested, especially in maybe the South Cambridgeshire pilots, because they are obviously public sector, and as we all know, this is a public sector union. You know, the fiscal position is very tight, and there was the cost neutral conditionality on the pilots. But what about South Cambridgeshire Council? Did they recruit to be able to support a move to a 32-hour week?
So they did not have to recruit anymore. Obviously, as I said before, they were able to recruit long term because of moving to the 4-day week, so fill those hard to fill roles. But also to say that, I mean, in some organisations that we know of, they have increased headcount slightly, but this works out on balance, because if you think of the boost to recruitment and retention, the reduction in absences, the reduction in reliance on expensive agency cover, it kind of comes out in the wash, basically. As you said, cost neutral is the aim of the game for the 4-day week, and it tends to be what we see.
Great, thanks, Phil. I'm going to take a few questions together because I think some of this has been covered, but I appreciate some people were joining a bit late. So Gillian and Rob, these ones are kind of for you, and I think you've kind of covered them. Someone has asked, how did parents, and especially women, cope with school drop-offs, etc., if working condensed hours I suppose the 4-day week. Basically what the question is flexi still available within a 4-day week? And within that as well, some people have asked, was a fixed day set as a 5th day which staff took off, or could staff choose the days? I know that's been covered, but if you could just kind of briefly touch on that again. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. So Gillian, I think you covered that pretty well in terms of the flexibility that was still open to staff, and if you could cover the 5th day and how that was managed.
Yeah, as I say, within it came the day off you got came down to a team level. You either chose a Monday off or a Friday off, and again it was probably like an even split. And I think the majority of people got the day that they were looking for, and certainly nobody approached us and was saying, oh, I didn't get what I wanted, or there was compromises made. As I say, one team had to do a rota to make sure that they had their cover, but that was 1 out of 14. As far as flexibility was concerned, we still have our flexi time, so you could still do longer hours and build up your flexi. As far as, again, that drop-off and pick-up times was a concern for some of our part-time staff because they worked that 6-hour period that the children were in school, and this would now mean that they would have to work probably 6.5 hours, which meant they also had to take a half-hour break. But again, it was just about giving that flexibility on, like we did during COVID. You know, you can start as early as you want, you can work for a couple of hours, you can then clock out, do what you need to do, come back, take that time off to go and do the drop off and pick up, start up again. And as long as it was okay with to work with the team, it was, and the line managers knew what was happening, then everything worked very, very smoothly. I hope that has covered everything, and I'll see if Rob has anything to add.
Rob, anything from you?
So in our case, flexibility was the key, and that was communicated very very clearly, both to staff, but also to managers, to team leaders, etc., to try and nip problems in the bud and allow everything to settle down in a way that worked for individuals. Based on the feedback that we had, that really did genuinely happen. Across the piece, we probably have worked more closely and productively with HR colleagues on this than almost any other issue in the organisation, and the working relationships actually improved substantially as a result of us having done that and having had that kind of core objective to make the 4-day week pilot succeed to the extent it has. And I think we can easily measure that on the basis that no one has opted out since we commenced it.
That's great. Thank you, Rob. So someone has posted that question as well. And Phil, I'm going to bring you on this. I think that Gillian and Rob have spoken to their experience of productivity increases as people that have been involved in the pilot. And like I say, we'll wait for the official report to come out on that. But someone has, said that they really like the idea of better working conditions, as we all do, that the 4-day week's a win-win for all, but there's challenges in the public sector and the wider economy, which obviously we all recognise, and that does the UK not have to start thinking about boosting productivity? I think that we're one of the least productive nations in OECD countries. So our methods of boosting productivity is something that PCS has given thought to. So I'm not going to say a PCS perspective on that, because I think that our perspective as a 4-day week does boost productivity. But Phil, I'd be really interested for you to come in and speak to what you've seen across the wider trials and pilots of the 4-day week in your work on that. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I mean, when we look at productivity, it's maybe not as obvious as you might think. Work more hours, be more productive. If that was the case, we'd all work or be forced to work 7 days a week, and then we'd be super productive. And it's just not the case, really. You need, significant work-life balance in order to maintain your productivity. And it's, again, it's that point about maintaining productivity. Currently, our work-life balance across the UK is not so great. You see a lot of burnout, stress, people being signed off, people getting ill, people changing jobs when they burn out. That leads to a reduction in productivity. What you need is long-term thinking, and that's what the reduction in working hours to a 4-day week gives. And that's what we've seen, in our trials, because every company, whether it's private or public, when they start a 4-day week trial, they start it with their KPIs, their key performance indicators in mind. They're looking at their productivity, and they measure it throughout. And we have, I can count on one hand the number of organizations that have gone back to a 5-day week. And those are, are mainly around issues with from our perspective, maybe a lack of commitment to making it work. But, you know, almost every single company has stuck with a 4-day week because it has shown to be an answer to their productivity problems.
Thanks, Phil. We've just had a question 4 minutes ago, and it was saying, apologies if this is covered or joined late, that's no problem. We have a devolved election in Scotland next year. What is PCS and other unions doing to lobby Scottish political parties to get a 4-day working week in their manifestos for the 2026 election? If parties stood on this, it would make the political reality of getting this through more realistic. Totally agree. We have spoken about this is what we're doing. This is what we've been doing for the last 4 years as a union. I think it's safe to say that PCS is leading the trade union movement and has been for the last 5 years on the 4-day week. Our work with autonomy on that in 2021. We've obviously we successfully lobbied and campaigned the Scottish Government to make this change and to, you know, implement something in their pay policy such as the pilots. And the fact that we've had 715 people here today and as PCS members, the collective strength of PCS members will be what makes the change on this. So Liam has posted the link to our petition in the chat. We're also going to be sending out the recording of this. What we can do now, while ministers are making a policy decision on the 4-day week, which we know they are currently doing, is for you, 639 of you left in here, to please sign that petition, to share it with colleagues, to share it with PCS members, and to encourage non-members to join. We're not an affiliated union, which obviously changes what we do in terms of our political lobbying. But like I say, we will be taking this to ministers throughout the next month, and this will be part of any industrial strategy that we have in the coming months with our group executive committees that represent you, and how we use your collective power over the next 12 months in the lead up to the parliamentary elections. There's quite a few questions that we've still had about things like, how will this work for me? I work part-time, or I work condensed hours. You know, what would be mandated? What is the PCS position? Just to go back to this point, there is no one size fits all, and Gillian and Rob are testament to that in terms of the engagement that happened with staff prior to the pilots being implemented. Our position is that your employers should be given the autonomy from the Scottish Government to do something like what Accounting and Bankruptcy in South of Scotland Enterprise have done, and to work with PCS and other recognised trade unions to make sure that when that time comes, your voice is heard as part of that, that the members, PCS members and workers across the Scottish devolved public sector are engaged in that and are shaping any pilots or any implementation of a 4-day week, so that it works for you in the same way that we've heard it's worked for Gillian and Rob and PCS members in these organisations. I've got one more question, time for one more question. I'm going to take one for you, Phil. Somebody has asked, how did this work? I've lost the question. In the South Cambridgeshire pilot, how did it work for social care workers? Have you got any information on that?
So yes, so it's South Cambridgeshire District Council, so they don't have any social care workers at the District Council. That is the next step. So we're sort of in talks with a couple of councils at the moment to try and get pilots up and running to make that work, you know, in larger councils.
Great, thank you, Phil. Okay, so I'm going to round up there. Thank you everyone for joining this webinar. I hope you feel like it's been interesting and useful to hear from Phil and Gillian and Rob. Like I say, we will be sending out the recording of this and an FAQ document out to all participants and to the membership across the Scottish devolved sector. And again, please plug that petition to pals and to colleagues who are PCS members or are not, and encourage them to join. And this will be something that PCS is progressing a lot over the coming months, like I say. Thanks for your time, everyone. Bye.